You're on QuickBooks and it's bulging at the seams. You've heard a lot of mixed reviews about ERP systems and you're not sure when you should make the transition onto a larger system or if you should even make the transition at all. That's what we're going to be talking about in this video. Welcome back, guys. My name is Chris and I teach people how to use some of the most popular ERP products in the world. If you search on YouTube for Microsoft Business Central, SAP, NetSuite, my tutorials come up at the top. And while it's fine for me to teach people how to use ERP software, a critical question that comes before that is, at what point should we even move on to an ERP system in the first place? And to be clear, when I say QuickBooks, I'm not just talking about QuickBooks. I'm really talking about any one of these accounting software for really small businesses. That could be Xero, Zoho Books, FreshBooks, Wave Accounting, or even one of the lower tier Sage products like Sage 50. Any one of these is really in that accounting. They're all in the same category. And so when I say QuickBooks, I'm talking about any one of these that you may be using. So with that in mind, I've got a series of questions here with some factors tied to each one of them that you should consider if you're on one of these accounting software and you feel like you should be moving to an ERP system. So first off, who should even be using QuickBooks in the first place? So let's rattle through some factors. If you have a small headcount, simple operations, you do not have requirements or at least complex requirements for inventory management or manufacturing. You have low transaction volume. You have revenue that is roughly less than between the $5 to $10 million range annually. And most importantly, and I think a lot of people don't even really consider this, the question of, do you even expect to grow in the first place over the next several years? So if your company is making, let's say, $4 million a year, but you don't anticipate that you're going to be growing very much or maybe not at all over the next several years, and whether it's because of market factors or maybe you just don't have any desire to grow your company beyond the point that it's currently at, well, in that case, then you may want to just stay on the system that you're currently on. So any one of these factors, it's not that you have to have all of them, but if you start to see several of those factors applying to your business, then you may be asking yourself, should I even move on to an ERP system in the first place? It might not be the right time. Maybe wait, see if you hit a point where you really need to start having more complex inventory management, you're getting more transaction volume, you're starting to hit $5, $6, $7 million in revenue a year. That's where you might want to reconsider things, which really brings us to our next question, which is, what are the warning signs that you have outgrown QuickBooks? So first off, you are expanding rapidly, or you expect to expand rapidly in the next few years. You may be a small kind of startup business, and while you may be at the pre-revenue stage or early stages of revenue, you know that based on your business model, you're going to be hitting high levels of revenue in the next, let's say, 3 years. You may want to be considering building in that ERP system at this early stage so you can grow into a larger business. Second thing is if you're dealing with spreadsheet sprawl. In other words, you've got all kinds of different spreadsheets throughout your system that keep track of your inventory, your sales, your various accounting. All of these different random spreadsheets are hard to keep track of, especially as your business starts to get larger. The third point is that you've got duct tape systems that are all kind of cobbled together. So you've got QuickBooks for your accounting, maybe you have Salesforce for your CRM, HubSpot for marketing, a different software for inventory management, Notion for projects, etc., etc. All of these disparate products and software are all vaguely tied together and in many cases just have no interaction with the other critical aspects of your business. That's a sign that you may want to bring them all under one unified ERP system. The next point you should keep in mind is if you're unable to generate the financial reporting that you need. And that could be for many different reasons. It might be that you have stakeholders are now demanding that you provide them with certain financial reporting. But for most companies, they just want to have certain financial reports for management purposes so they can know what direction they should go in, how to grow their business, what areas of their business are struggling. If you've got all of these different spreadsheets, it can be hard to determine what is the actual financial state of your company and what points you should be focusing on. Another critical thing thing to keep in mind is if you are currently or expected to grow into being a multi-entity or multi-currency organization. If you've got 3 or more subsidiaries, you're dealing with, let's say, 6 or more different currencies, you're starting to get to a point where having things just in QuickBooks or even just in Excel spreadsheets can become almost impossible to keep track of. That is an easy one that almost immediately forces you into going to an ERP system. And lastly, and this is a critical one, your operations team and your finance team are in completely different worlds. They have no idea what's going on with each other, and they really have no idea or way of collaborating with each other in terms of what's happening on the finance side and what is expected on the operations team. So those are the red flags, the warning signs that you may need to move on to an ERP system. Now, before we move on to the next question, I do want to say if you'd like more in-depth and even one-on-one consultation in terms of how to select an ERP system that's right for you, you can check out my contact form down below. I do provide short, free consultations for companies looking to select an ERP. But if you're looking for a higher level of service, really a white glove approach to ERP selection, also choosing an implementation partner, and ultimately migrating you on so you have a successful implementation with your ERP system, then check out ERP Advisors Group. They're the sponsor of this current video. I'll have a link for them down below. They will walk you through that full line to ultimately successfully get you on the ERP system that's going to be right for you. So with that in mind, let's move on to the next critical question, which is you've determined that you need an ERP system. How do you approach the ERP selection process? And first off, you want to clearly lay out your requirements and the focus points of your business before you start reaching out to vendors. This is a common mistake that businesses make as they're starting to navigate and research these various different types of ERP software. They start reaching out to these companies saying, hey, can you provide me a demo? Can you give me more information about what you do? That is unfortunately the wrong approach to it, because what's going to happen is if you don't clearly know exactly what you're looking for, you're going to start getting hit with all of these different shiny presentations about all the fantastic and new things that these ERP systems can do, which can be very distracting and lead you off the path of what you actually need for your business to grow from the ERP system. And the analogy that comes to mind, at least for me, is if you're gonna go grocery shopping, you wanna know exactly what you need to buy. What is missing from your fridge that you need to get from the store? So if I go grocery shopping, I have a list of 15 things. I go in there, I get 15 things, and I walk out. If my wife goes grocery shopping, she goes to shop. So she's gonna look through the aisle. She's gonna say, oh, that's interesting. Ooh, I've never tried that before. The kids might like this. And she puts all these things in the grocery chart, and then she comes to the till at the end of the day, and she's gonna end up paying way more and not necessarily having even gotten the things that maybe she still needed those 15 items, but she got so distracted with everything else that maybe she only got 9 of the 15 things that were critical to get in the first place. So don't let yourself get distracted. Have a clear outline of exactly what you need before you start getting inundated by these various vendors and partners. Another thing you should keep in mind is the various options that you do have within your tier. So don't allow yourself to just check out maybe 2 or 3 different ERP options. If you're moving from QuickBooks to an ERP system, you're probably going to be falling in that small, maybe mid-sized business tier of ERPs, which is about 10 to 15 viable ERP options for almost any business. So you've got things like Oracle NetSuite, Microsoft Dynamics Business Central, Odoo, Acumatica, Epicor, Sage. There's all kinds of options in this category, and none of them are the perfect option. There's no such thing as a perfect ERP. It's just like buying a car. You don't want to buy the best car. You want to buy the best car for you. Same thing with an ERP. You're just choosing the ERP that's going to be right for your exact requirements. So you want to really look at the entire field and start to whittle it down now that you've set your exact requirements to maybe a list of 3 or 4 options that really seem like a good fit for what you're looking for. The next point is to evaluate the implementation partners just as much as you do with the software itself. What do I mean by that? So you're looking for an ERP, and let's say you have whittled things down to 4 options. Let's say there's NetSuite, Sage Intacct, Odoo, and Business Central. So you've got these options. You know they all seem to potentially be a good fit for you. Well, there's an entire other layer that you need to keep in mind, which is the implementation partner that's actually going to be getting you onto this system. Now, I know a lot of companies moving from QuickBooks have the dreamy idea that they're just going to try to do the implementation themselves. In the vast majority of cases, that is not advisable. Now, there are certain ERP systems that are kind of branded and lend themselves to an easier implementation. Odoo, for example, has kind of a do-it-yourself approach. But even then, most successful implementations still rely on some kind of an Odoo IT expert who's going to be walking you through the process. He's done plenty of implementations. He's very familiar with the system, etc. So no matter what, whether it's a full company, whether it's one guy, you're gonna want someone to help guide you through, and in some cases do a lot of the heavy lifting on the implementation. And that layer, because even if you've got 4 different options, for each option, you're probably gonna have maybe 2 to 10 different implementation partners that are possible for that one ERP. And you need to think with both. And when it comes to that, one thing that I don't think people think with is the fact that if you chose, let's say you have 15 different ERP options, if you chose the worst relative option for your company, but had the best implementation partner, not necessarily the most expensive, but just the most qualified, the most hardworking, having your best interests in mind, to do that worst ERP option implementation, the likelihood that that's going to be successful is far greater than if you selected the objectively best option for an ERP, but the worst implementation partner, which is almost guaranteed to fail. So at all times, you have to be thinking with not only what ERP are you selecting, but what implementation partner is going to be best for that particular ERP and for your business specifically. Different consulting agencies handle things differently. Sometimes you're going to want a really intimate relationship. In other instances, you just want something that's cheap. It just depends on your requirements. And that leads right into my next recommendation, which is making sure you get multiple proposals. Not just at an ERP level, but let's say specifically for Sage Intacct, you want to reach out to a number of different implementation companies to get a concept of what is the differences between these companies, which ones seem more impressive, what's the difference in pricing. The next tip I have for you is, let's say, again, you've whittled things down to 3 different types of ERPs, and let's say you have 4 different options of implementation partners for each. Well, that's 12 ultimate different decisions, 12 different companies, 4 different ERP software that you could select from. What you want to do is you want to formulate a script that you give to these companies to do a demonstration for you. This is a high recommendation that most companies just don't even consider because they're so distracted with all these different features and options. What you need to do, kind of going back to that first recommendation I gave, is know exactly what your core requirements are. What are you trying to get out of the system, and make a script. If a core part of your business is they need to show you how you're going to do inventory management and transfers between 2 different warehouses, that needs to be explicitly on your script that you're going to provide the implementation partner. And you're going to say, show me how to do that in your system. And they should be able to provide that. Any company can have their set pattern that they walk people through because they've done it a million times. And what they're going to do is they're going to try to show off all the shiny new features that this system can do, which again is just a distraction from what you critically need out of your ERP system. So don't let yourself get kind of waylaid off of the path. Know from your script what is required. Make sure that the companies all do the same demonstration. So there's a few benefits of that. First off, if they're all having to do the same script, that's really going to have a apples to apples comparison where you can go, not, these guys showed me this and these guys showed me something else, but they all showed me the same thing and these guys did it the best. A second thing you're going to see from that is a lot of companies who are at a lower rate of experience or professionalism, they're not going to want to follow your script. So they're going to approach it by saying, okay, well, this is how we do our demos, and I'll touch on a few points that you had in your script. Well, that's a perfect red flag that they really don't know the system that well, because a good implementation partner is going to look at your script and go, great, I'm going to show you exactly how to do this, and I'm going to show it seamlessly in the system that I'm trying to show off. So that is something that, again, most clients, when they're looking for not just an ERP, but also an implementation partner, they just don't think of doing it. It it is one of the best recommendations that I can give for successfully choosing the best partner for you. All right, so let's say at this point you've chosen an ERP and you've selected what you think is going to be the best implementation partner for you. There are some hard truths and some lights at the end of the road that you should keep in mind. So first off, the hard truths. Number one, this project is most likely going to cost more than you think or you have been quoted. And there's several different reasons for that. First off, these companies and these ERP systems, they tend to have really convoluted pricing. Not all of them. Some of them tend to have a little bit of a cleaner approach, but if you're looking at something like Oracle NetSuite, Microsoft Business Central, the way they handle pricing is incredibly difficult to wrap your wits around. And even their own sales reps often don't totally know how the price is going to shake out until they actually put all the different things on the quote. So what you might get as an initial amount, you might think it's only going to be $25,000, but then when you go to give them your credit card, suddenly it's, oh, well, you also need to get the sandbox, and there's also this 5% fee for that, and there's a licensing cost of this, and only 10 of your users actually qualify to be standard users, and then another 8 are going to have to be premium users, and they cost twice as much. These things are regular when you're getting an ERP system, so expect those amounts to bloat at the initial purchase stage, and expect that when you go through the implementation, there's going to be other things that come up. There's going to be other modules you may need or other features or integrations that cost money. And that's all just on the software side. The implementation itself also costs money, and in many cases, it tends to cost more than at least the 1-year license for your software. So keep in mind, you're going to be paying for the software, not just this year, next year, but until eternity for that particular system as long as you use it. But at least there's just the first year, generally speaking, most companies don't go beyond 1 year of an implementation. There's going to be that first year upfront cost to get it installed and onto the system in the first place. And those implementation costs, it does depend on the software in terms of the ratio between the implementation costs to the software costs. But generally speaking, I would say 1-to-1 is on the low end, and it can easily go to 2-to-1, 3-to-1. So if, for example, you're going to be paying $30,000 for the ERP system, you might be paying 30, 40, 50, well over that just for the implementation. And if you're looking at a more expensive ERP system like NetSuite, that could easily cost you $60,000 a year for the software, and then maybe $100,000 for the implementation. You get the idea. So that is the first thing you should absolutely keep in mind. It very frequently goes over budget. The second thing you should keep in mind is it also tends to go over timeline. So if timeline is a critical element for you, you just need to be aware of the fact that these companies will generally, and I don't just mean the software companies, but also the implementation partners, often try to give a rosy concept of how long it's going to take because they're trying to close your business and they know you're checking out other partners. They don't want to give you what's going to be probably a more realistic but less appealing timeline. So they're going to tell you just 2 months, maybe 3 months. More realistically, implementations tend to take between 3 and 9 months. Really depends on a lot of different things, not just the implementation. Now, that obviously deals with a lot of different factors, including which software you're going with, how many customizations you need, etc. But just keep in mind, if you're getting a really short timeline, you should be cautious to the fact that it might be taking quite a bit longer than that. Now, if you do have a company come to you and say, hey, you're trying to get Business Central, this timeline is probably going to take between 5 and 8 months. Unless you know you've got really complex requirements, I'd probably take them at their word and at least think that that is a realistic starting timeline. But even then, a large portion of companies, even with the best intentions and honest estimations, often just go over timeline because unexpected things come up. Change management tends to be more difficult than they were expecting, which brings me to the next hard truth, which is that change management can be the most difficult part of an implementation. It is often the most underestimated and overlooked aspect of an implementation because it's so easy to get into the weeds with the budget and the timeline and the technical difficulties and the team members, and you overlook the fact that even if it's completely a successful implementation in terms of on budget, in timeline, fulfilling all the requirements that you need, if your employees and the users don't want to use the system, don't know how it works, are not in agreement with the implementation in the first place, you're going to have a failed implementation. It could be perfect in every other regard, but if they're not going to use it, what's the point? So you need to think with this early on. It tends to be very difficult and again, underestimated for most companies because it's the soft human element of it that most people just don't put enough attention on. You want to make sure you set your internal champions early and that they do a proper job of getting the team on board, recognizing the benefits to the company and to the benefits of the user when applicable. So that is something you need to keep in mind early on if you want to have a successful implementation. The fourth thing you should keep in mind is that success is not guaranteed. Despite the fact that you're putting tons of money forward just for the software and for the implementation partner and the time and effort, there is a decent chance that it will result in what's considered a failed implementation. And there are many studies and surveys out there just in the last few years that tally up, and there's a pretty clear consensus that between 50 to 75% of ERP implementations result in what, from the client's standpoint, is considered a failure. And just to be clear, because that sounds like a really high number, it doesn't mean that they completely ditched the project, they never made it onto the system. What it means is there was some element or maybe multiple elements of the project that ultimately resulted in the client feeling that the project could not be considered a success, it was considered a failure. So that might have been that they went over budget, it took way too long, they didn't get all the core requirements they wanted. So if they wanted 12 things, maybe they only got 9, so they considered that wasn't fully successful. The thing you need to keep in mind is just that it can be difficult to bring all of these things together to ultimately result in what is considered a successful implementation from your standpoint. Now, I would argue the most important aspect of that is choosing a proper implementation partner, someone who is going to try to keep things in budget, in the right timeline, and successfully get you to have the right core components and features that you do require. And if they're a really good consultant company, they'll also help you navigate change management and make sure that your champions can do what they need to do on the internal side while the consulting company's handling the more technical elements of things. So those are the hard truths. Let's now take a look at some of the benefits of getting onto an ERP system. And arguably the most important element is just the scalability, the ability to take your company from a certain size and often being constrained at that size to be able to expand many times over in the near future. And when it comes to doing this scaling and getting an ERP system, the best analogy I've ever heard is that getting an ERP system is like getting a root canal. It's not that you want to do it, it's that you have to do it. And not doing it is going to end up being more painful than just going through the operation in the first place. So don't look at this ERP implementation like it's going to be this fun or super successful project. It's probably going to be painful, it's going to be expensive, it's going to be hard, but ultimately, if you are growing, and if you look at those earlier questions we asked at the beginning of this video, if you're getting to the point where you have to move off of your QuickBooks software, then you might as well make it as painless as possible. The second thing you should keep in mind in terms of a benefit is it gives you one single source of truth. The whole point of an ERP system is it brings all of these different core components of your business together into one single repository. So as a result, your operations team is accessing the same information that your sales team and your finance team and the manufacturing process, they're all dipping into the same system. The next critical benefit is the control over financial reporting. So just like I talked about in QuickBooks systems, you often are limited in terms of your ability to generate proper reports. When you're dealing with an ERP system, because you have that single source of truth, you can do some pretty incredible things from a financial reporting standpoint to provide insights for management to grow your business even further. And then the fourth major benefit when you're moving on to these new systems is you can bring in process discipline. And this is one that most companies don't fully think about or realize has so much potential benefit for them, is the concept that you've got your business and every element of your business has certain process flows where when they're handling vendor bills, they do it a certain way. And when they're stocking the warehouse, they handle it a certain way. Well, when you're moving on to an ERP system, you it gives you the opportunity to recognize you really need to evaluate how your business runs in each different aspect and determine which ways and process flows do you have are successful and really help your business be the business that it is, and which elements were maybe not properly formulated or you've been kind of jerry-rigging things. And ultimately, now that you're moving on to an ERP system that handles vendor bills a certain way, this is an opportunity to change the way you actually handle your business to fit in with and take advantage of the benefit of how the ERP system is going to operate. So it's not that you're going to change all elements of your business, but you can find the weak spots and make modifications to your business practice to match in with the optimal way that the ERP system is going to run. And again, if you've got a good implementation partner, they're going to help you recognize these process flows that should be modified, and they'll give you recommendations in terms of how you can configure them to match in with the ERP system best. All right, so those are the critical things to think with in terms of when you should move off of QuickBooks and how to select the right ERP for you. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If so, hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And like I said earlier, if you want more consultation in terms of how to select an ERP, you can reach out to me on the contact forms below. And if you want a higher level of service and a white glove approach to not only ERP selection, but also implementation partner selection, migration, and ultimately a successful implementation, reach out to ERP Advisors Group. They're one of the top ERP selection companies and consulting companies on the planet. So link for them down below. And ultimately, I hope to see you in the next video.